Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Rad Friends podcast, where we try to answer some of life's thorniest questions. Today, we're going to be asking the question, does legacy matter? And I'm joined by my rad friend, Kris Abdelmessih. He is a writer, father, former options trader, and just an all-around amazing dude. What's good, Kris?
What's going on, man? Thank you for having me on. It's too kind of an intro. Yeah, man. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
thank you so much. I want to just jump in actually with a question that I've been meaning to ask you for a while. So tell us, you traded options. We had a similar-ish career path. We're around the same age, and you pulled the ripcord. How many
Yeah.
years ago?
2 years ago.
2 years ago. Two years
Yeah.
ago, you pulled the ripcord. Tell us a bit about how have you been spending those 2 years? So, what, 20 years in the hedge fund industry
Yeah.
trading, 2 years. How do you describe those 2 years?
Yeah. Confused mostly. I traded for 21 years. Half those years were in New York City. The other half were out here in the Bay Area. First half was I was one of those guys that yelled and screamed on the trading floor with one of those, mesh jackets on. And the last 10 years, the last 10 years I was trading was at a hedge fund here in San Fran. And I ended up just after 20 years, I was kind of like, that's like enough to do one thing for. I kind of gotten the itch before, it takes a long time to come around that decision that you're actually going to pull the ripcord. So it had been lingering, and COVID kind of, I guess, probably pushed me over the edge as it's kind of shuffled things for lots of people. But since then, well, I would say this, one of the things that really kind of helped it was just my kids getting a little bit older. And, right now my kids are now 7 and almost 10.
Okay. They were
And
like 5 and 8 when you left.
yeah. And, we're kind of heading into like the magic years, I think you've called them sort of like the magic years, and they are. And there was a period of time. Look, my wife had taken a year off back in 2018, and we really like the rhythm of life where you had only one parent was working. And obviously there's a lot of costs to doing that instead of having two parents working, especially when you live in California. But on balance, we thought it was worthwhile. So she was supportive of it. And so when I did it, the idea was kind of explore, if you think about like the explore, exploit kind of model. I mean, the way I think of this is just a season of life. So my kids are in these magic years. I'm in total explore mode, which is basically entailed writing, having lots of conversations with people. The writing ends up being sort of the bottom of everything, where everything kind of like leads back to that. Like, I get a lot of outreach. I end up meeting a lot of people just because I write on the internet. And so that ends up kind of being triage. So I have some ideas about things like when I go into exploit mode. I have some ideas there, and that season I'm not exactly sure when that season will start. I think probably kind of soon, but that is kind of how I think about it. It's just seasons. I would say you were a big inspiration. Your writing was a big inspiration to help me think about things in a different way.
Thank you.
I think it's very hard especially I'm, son of immigrants as well. And it's kind of crazy to them, still hard on my mom to think that I don't have a 9 to 5 job. That's hard for her. But it's not this idea, like I wasn't running away from work. I actually like work. This, in some ways, one of the funny things that happens here is like a lot of times I want to be working on something, and then like you don't want to be hanging out with your kids. And that's like this other side of the coin that kind of comes up sometimes. Right. So anyway, it's mostly been explore mode. There'll be a time to go back into kill mode.
Oh, beautiful. And
Yeah.
so the question people always ask me was, when you were working in this kind of hedge fund, fancy, presumably high paying job, was there a moment that you're like, because you said you liked it. And I liked where I worked as well. I didn't love it, but it was
Mm-hmm.
for a job, it was fine. I had a lot of autonomy. I had a lot of freedom. I didn't travel much. I didn't really work a ton on weekends.
Mhm.
Was there a moment during trading when you said, I need to leave?
It wasn't one moment, but there was an accumulation of realizations. So, and this bears like backing up one moment. Just when I got into this business. So first thing about me, I'm inherently lazy. I say lazy in this, like, maybe that's not the right way of saying it, but it's, I don't, it's hard to get me to do things I don't want to do. So when I was coming out of college, the idea of like having a job and just like grinding away, I never thought that I would be down for that. So coming out of college, I was pretty intent on like, how do I do something that doesn't look like work? I mean, I watched my parents and it's like drudgery. Their life was drudgery. And I was like, I don't want to do that. So when I got out of college, you know, I got hired by this company called Susquehanna, and Susquehanna's like whole interview process or whatever was just playing a bunch of games, and it looked like fun. And then they take me to the trading floor, and I'm like, this doesn't look like a desk job. This looks like fun. So I got into the business because it looked fun. That was, and it wasn't long hours. I mean, market hours are not that long. There's not, it wasn't like living this life where I'm like building models till midnight. I mean, I was a floor trader. I was a monkey. So it was kind of a good, I like that balance of life where I was like, not that many hours, but they were intense while you're having them. And so, but then when I went up to the hedge fund, things quieted down a lot. Now you're in this room that's like a library. It's no longer standing shoulder to shoulder with 100 people yelling and screaming. It's not fun in the same way. It's fun in some other ways. It's more generative. I'm sitting there and I'm building and I'm working with all these teams like developers, database people, and building infrastructure, building dashboards, like building a cockpit so that I could do this job in a different way, sort of evolve. That part was really cool. But a lot of that generative work was super concentrated on the front end of getting a job. And then it was, then it's just was a lot of just grinding day in, day out. You call it, it's like a knife fight on the phones with brokers all day long, just you're constantly distracted. You're just always on the phone. So that rhythm of life, and my bosses, to their credit, they were doing that. They were doing that too. It's not like they were sitting in some corner office. They were battling all day too. So I said, well, I don't really want to do that forever. So, and but I learned that I really like the generative aspect of the job. And then when I started writing on the internet, like part-time, then I realized, like, oh, this is fits what I want to be doing. I want to be creating more than these knife fights every day. And that's when I knew. I was like, this is the next 20 years or 30 years of my working life are going to be more in this mode than the daily battle.
Oh wow, that's so awesome. So the knife fights really cover kind of the daily. And for those who aren't familiar, trading is a lot of like arguing on the phone, really quick decisions,
Yep.
watching news. So it's just like hard to take a bathroom break. I always presume that you have to like hold in your pee if like something's happening at a particular moment.
Oh yeah.
So it was more like I just can't see myself doing this knife fight for another 20 years. It's like I'm paraphrasing, but it had a season. I had a season for it, but to knife fight for until I'm 60 is just not the life that I want for myself.
That's right.
So how do you think, so trading is one of these things that is so specialized. It's like, and you were a commodities trader?
Yeah. I did equities for 5 years, and then the rest of my career was in commodities.
And so I know people listening, they always, you get senior, you make money, you get specialized in general. Like until you become the CEO, then you're a generalist, again, managing people. But so you're doing this like hardcore knife fighting, computer modeling, trading, and so on. I was analyzing quantitative. Actually, funny enough, we were analyzing hedge funds like yours. So I was analyzing the people like you. And I know that there's a lot of people listening. They're like, oh, I'm a emerging markets sales trader, or I am, a data scientist for this, ad tech companies. How did you give yourself permission or confidence to know that you could take what the world would see as a very narrow skill set and reposition it or reopen it to a much wider set of activities, new types of jobs? Like, how did that work through your mind, this specialization question?
That's a great question. I can answer it in multiple ways. First of all, most traders, lots of traders, do have a fear that they are overly specialized. I remember my business partner and I always used to joke that, the business is hard, right? So it's like this total Red Queen. So every year it gets harder, and it starts to feel like blood from a stone. It's just the nature of a business that gets more efficient over time, which is the trading world, basically. So, we would always say we're 1 year away from being realtors. Like we're always 1 year away from either working in enterprise software sales, or that would be the highbrow version, or we were going to be real estate brokers. Like that was always, and knowing full well that you're going to have to start at the bottom, and it's going to take you 10 years to get a book of business and whatever this was. But that was always the kind of the joke between us, is like, we're 1 year away from being chewed up and spit out. So on the one hand, the fear, that fear lived within me 100%. But if I'm reflecting back on it now, the reality is, like, I had a membership when I was in New York. Over my time, I went from trading equities, options, to ETFs, I had a membership on the New York Stock Exchange, the American Stock Exchange, the Merck, the COMEX, and the NIBOT. I've only met one other person in my life, by the way, that's had a membership on all 5 of those at one point. So, and my last 2 years on the floor, I was literally just whatever got busy, I would just go throw on the jacket and the badge that belonged to that pit, and I would just go to that floor of the building and just step in that pit and trade. And everybody around me was a stranger.
Just interject here, just to translate for non-finance people.
Yeah.
Kris was trading, let's say, stocks. And then when it got busy or boring, he'd look around and say, where is it more interesting? And it's like, oh, trading milk futures. And you would go to like the milk. Is that the right paraphrase?
Yeah,
you'd
totally.
Find an opportunity adjacent to your current role and like move into it.
That's right.
Okay.
So you wouldn't know how that, so you didn't know who the players. It was like going into, like, you're playing No Limit Hold'em, and then you go over to like Omaha, and just like, I don't know the players. I don't know the strategy. I don't know how the idiosyncrasies of this game. So, like anything, you go there and you bet really small. You just manage your risk. You bet really, really small, and you experiment, and then you start to figure it out. You start to piece the puzzle together, and it's just like detective work at the end of the day. So I had this history of always being able to do this. And then I transitioned from being a floor trader to trading upstairs. And that was a hard transition. I mean, that's for a separate nerd podcast altogether. I could talk about that. But like, then it was that. So when I thought about it, it was like, well, I really did adapt a lot, even though, like, if you looked at my career, like, I'm just a trader, but I did a lot of different stuff within that realm. And then the biggest unlock came when I started writing, honestly, because that gave me the confidence. Like, once I started writing, and you get other people's feedback, and people are saying, this is actually pretty good. You actually are able to express yourself in this way fairly well. And I realized that, well, if I can do that, and I've been able to adapt, like, I do have a ton of confidence. I mean, at the end of the day, like, I just, irrational or not, I do have a lot of confidence that, like, whatever I decide I want to do, I'll probably get good at it, because I'm willing to put the work in, and and I know, kind of how about that. So
I love that you mentioned the experiment, and you've been using a lot of good words: experiment, explore, exploit.
Mhm.
I'd jump in with my own experience was similar in that for me, the experimentation wasn't writing per se online, but I tried all these different ideas when I was at BlackRock. I would just write these business plans for, Uber for recruiting that would be one. I would organize these events in New York City. I would write a culture blog. Like, I remember reviewing TV on the Radio's album, and then the Tara, some author artist at the Guggenheim, their exhibit. And I just had all these experiments, and similar to you, I said to myself, I have this unwavering confidence in myself. Not that I am particularly gifted, but I will show up. I will show up more than anyone else, so to speak. And especially if I'm passionate about the thing, then I will just show up more than, and I just, that's the confidence in showing up into something that you're passionate about and just believing that good things will work out for you. So I could see a lot of similarities there. And I want to point out to our listeners, because I think that people look, you're 2 years into it and I'm 8 years into it in the post Wall Street journey. And people look at me like, okay, you have all these followers and you could do anything. You could launch a podcast and you have 40,000 eyeballs on it. And so you have this, unfair advantage, or you have something that I don't have. It's a little harder for people to say, like, 8 years ago, okay, you started this, but tell us a bit about, what was the first thing you wrote on the internet publicly? Do you remember?
It was one of two things. One, it was either why I thought the Lambda school idea was cool, which
Lambda school.
Yeah, which I think didn't age well. They changed their name and pivoted and all that stuff. So whatever, didn't age well. And then I think the other one was, it was either that or I wrote something about how I managed my sort of like media diet.
Okay.
I called it the idea triage model.
Okay.
And it was a part 1, and I never published part 2, even though I have a draft of it. But it was, I want to say something about that, because it is something I've talked to people about. You just start out by copying.
Yeah.
I mean, and it wasn't for me, like a lot of the first things that I wrote were just, hey, I consumed this podcast. I consumed this other thing that I read, and I have thoughts on it, and I shared them. That's all it was.
That's how RadReads started.
Yeah.
I just summarized articles. I was ChatGPT before ChatGPT existed.
That's right. That's right. That's all it was. And then it was 6. So it's like you add your commentary to stuff, and then, every now and then somebody like resonates with your commentary. And 6 months later, 6 months later, I started writing pieces that were a lot more original. And that was when it like kind of took off, was after that point. But in the beginning, you just start off by copying.
Mm-hmm. And where were you publishing to?
Oh, you know what? It was MailChimp.
MailChimp.
Yeah. Actually, the way the newsletter started was, it started with a newsletter, basically. Oh. So the way it started was, I was already doing this with like, I was blowing up my friends' WhatsApps with like, here's an article that I read and I thought it was really cool. And I have all this commentary, and I would do this like multiple times a day with podcasts, all this content. People were like, how the hell do you have all this time? Like, I have a desk job.
You were working. This is why you were working.
I was working. Yeah. People were like, how do you have all the time for all this? I'm like, yeah, you have a desk job. You can kind of have something off on the side. It's not a big deal. And then my wife, she said, you got to stop, man. You're just blowing everybody up all the time. Nobody needs this on like all these notifications. She said, why don't you consolidate them all and send one a week? Where they're all summed up. And I said, wow, you're so smart. That's a great idea. So I emailed 100. I just went into my Rolodex and emailed 100 friends and said, hey, I'm going to do this. Would you subscribe? 40 people said, yeah.
It's almost identical to RadReads. I mean, it was 36 for me. I wasn't doing it on the DMs. I was just doing it through like one-on-one Gmail. So basically the same concept. And I love that for people that don't know, you're a prolific, it's been 2 years since you left finance. You're a prolific creator. You have a huge following, numbers wise as well, but you're just a very engaged member of, I guess it would be FinTwit, financial Twitter, but
right.
Or nerd finance Twitter, nerd Twit.
Finance.
You're an important figurehead in nerd finance Twitter. And it's just awesome to see, because I'll tell my side of the story where you reach out to me off of, again, one of the emails that I sent for RadReads, and just, probably something just nice, like cool story, nice article. I appreciate you, something very kind. And just from that, I watched you just kind of write this newsletter and start blogging and do this. And then I see you now, and you're an established figure in this online world. And so to anyone listening thinking, I don't have an audience. No one's going to pay attention. Everyone, I know it's a trope, but you have 2 people here that are living proof of it, that literally 36 people cared for the first effort. And then if you just show up, great shit will happen. And so I just love hearing that story.
You know, I want to say something. You gave me a piece of advice in the beginning, actually. You probably don't remember, but the piece of advice that you gave me was, you said something like 5% of, maybe it was even less, of newsletters make it to issue number 20.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that gave me, it's like, once you tell me that, it's like, you gave me a bogey. So like, okay, I can do that.
Yeah.
So that was, and I think that's really, that's amazing advice. And you should, like, that's a good thing to tell people. And it's true with podcasts too, right? Something like that. It's like most of
I think it's even lower. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a good reminder for people. Like, showing up is 95%.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sending issue 400 of RadReads next weekend. And so, like, I'm in this conversation as James Clear and Tim Ferriss, not because I have achieved, the notoriety and success of them as writers and so on, but just if you just say, who has a newsletter for greater than 400 weeks? There's just not that many people. Right. So like, I'm in the same conversation as them, which is just, again, not through any unique, I think the unique talent is showing up. So
endurance.
Yeah.
There's a lot to say for endurance, man.
I know. Totally. I know. Tell me, you said you've been in the explore phase and you think you're getting closer to exploiting. What does exploit mean to the untrained ear that doesn't follow Venkatesh Rao? And then what might that look like for you? However much you're willing to say. Yeah.
So one thing is I'm pretty stealth about. So, but I'll say that it is the correct expression, I think, of the finance writing that I've been doing and the educational lens for how I do it. One of them is sort of a product that would be the correct expression in my mind of doing that. It's something that is extremely hands-on. Cool. And then the other thing is writing. So I'm playing around with a couple ideas for a book that I want to write, but I have several ideas for it. My guess is it'll probably end up looking something like taking the stuff that I've written online, packaging it up in some kind of artifact and just having that. So, and when I say exploit, it's not because of, when I say exploit, I think about it in terms of time spent. So this is something that I want to spend meaningful blocks of time on continuously. So writing right now is about a 10 to 15 hour a week endeavor. When I think about exploit, probably thinking something that's about twice that amount of time spent.
So almost like a full-time job, effectively.
Oh, yeah. Like the way, probably just with a lot more months of leisure kind of sprinkled in there, having a pretty open schedule. But it's just something the idea of having something at the end, like an artifact, like creating something besides just like this ongoing body of work, just something like I've told you, I think that I know that you've sort of moved past a lot of your early writing, and that's how it is when you write. It's like you're enamored of something, maybe could be for years, and you move on. Yeah. And I think that your writing about career change is some of the best writing that exists out there on it. And I've encouraged you to take all of that and put it into a physical artifact that you can hand somebody and say, this is like a closed chapter of something, a body of work that I've done, but it is evergreen valuable.
Yeah.
And here you go.
Oh man. Ooh.
So I think it's valuable to do that.
Yeah. You're giving me chills because I'm kind of in a new explore phase, and I'm trying to think about where I direct my exploit energy. Because it is kind of, you plant a lot of seeds, you have fun, it's kind of lower stakes, you're not attached to a lot of the outcomes of different things. Like this podcast is an example of a seed planted. But then as something kind of starts to bubble, I feel it like this like coming out of me. It's like, okay, this is the thing. I want to spend all of my energy on this thing. So yeah, more to come on my end, and excited to see what comes on yours. So, all right, let's pivot. Let's pivot to
Yeah.
our question. So before we jump into the question, I wanted all our listeners to know that we actually have these questions. We discuss them in a group setting through these like ongoing group coaching cohorts. So if it's interesting to you, if you want to discuss, does legacy matter with a bunch of like-minded peers and myself, check out radreads.co/coaching. All right. So up for the main event. I wish I had like a little, Michael Buffer sound, but does legacy matter? What do you hear? What do you hear in that question?
Yeah. I mean, fear. But let me, okay. So, I knew that this was going to be the question, of course. So yesterday I took a walk with our mutual friend, Sunil, who you introduced me to.
Shout out Sunil.
Yeah, totally. When you moved out, you told me he was moving out here, we connected and we've become fast friends. And I took a walk with him yesterday, and I mentioned that I actually asked him the question. I said, me and Kay are going to, because he asked me, like, what are you guys going to chop it up about? And I told him the question, and I asked him, well, what do you think? And he said he loved the song at the end of Hamilton, where Hamilton says the line about, legacy is planting seeds that you'll never see them sprout, or, paraphrasing. I don't remember the actual lyrics. You're just never going to see the result, but you plant the seeds anyway. And my reaction to it was, I thought it was a beautiful sentiment, but I said, the way I actually feel, you asked me that. And when you asked me that, all that I thought to myself was something that was just far less grand in a way. It was really just, I'm kind of very much, from dust we came, and from dust we shall return. And I don't consciously think about legacy. So I thought but I did go, I had an uncle pass last year, and I was at the funeral, and it was really, really beautiful. It was actually very touching and uplifting to see all of these people come out of the woodwork, but from different walks of life, like from business, from the church, from the different parts of the community. And I got to hear all these awesome things, that the ways that they've touched him. And it presented to me a lot of facets about who he was that I didn't see, because I'm his nephew and I only see one part of him, but there was all of these facets to him. But the thing that was common is just how many people he had touched. And I thought to myself, legacy to me doesn't really have to do with the far future. It's really, hey man, if you show up to my funeral and you're like, you know what, I'm better off for having known this guy. He kind of, he made my life a little bit better. That would be pretty satisfying to me, because like I said, I'm kind of like from dust to dust on this. So just having that small little mark is kind of what it means to me. That said, then I thought about my actions. So that's like intellectually how I think of it. Then I was thinking, well, there's a little bit of a mismatch with my actions, because, for example, we have been traveling since I left working. We spend our summers traveling for more weeks than not over the summer. And we're taking our kids to lots of places, and it's very important to me to have, like, travel is just a priority. It's just something that we think is very important for them to open their minds. And I don't know if it's going to open their minds exactly. It's just the best bet I can think of for helping to open their minds, is just to expose them. So we log a lot of miles with them. We take them lots of places. None of this would be possible if I was working, because it's a lot of it is I'm with them during the weeks of those trips. And implicitly, what am I doing? I'm giving them the thing that I think is important. That's legacy. I'm trying to impart to them a piece of what I think is important. Like, there's an element of, maybe there's an element of narcissism in there. I think this is important. Who the hell am I? How do I know what's important? But at the end of the day, like, we all have to make a bet, and I'm betting that this is important, and I want them to have perspective. It's very, I didn't get that when I was younger. College is what gave me that, because I met people from all over the place. And to me, that was the primary value of college. To me, was getting out of a narrow world and meeting people that just had a lot of different thoughts and experiences than I did. Travel is the same thing to me. And I just want to kind of give that to them. I don't know if it'll land, but it's the bet I'm making.
So is it fair to paraphrase? I hear two things. It's like, one is, we're all gonna die. What's the point? Alex Hermosi has this thing. He goes, if you're scared of putting yourself out there, just remember, one day you're gonna die, and people are gonna be on their phones at your funeral.
Right.
And it's just kind of like, legacy schmegacy. Right?
Yep.
So there's one school of that, but then there's also, I wouldn't say it's contradictory, but an adjacent belief of sorts, that there are a series of virtues, things that I find to be virtuous, good qualities, good human qualities. And I would like my descendants, the people I love the most, the people that will continue to live while I'm gone, to have considered or tasted or upheld some of those virtues, with a full disclaimer that, like, you're not even sure that they should be. You're not convinced that they're virtues in and of themselves.
Right. I think can appreciate that. When I think about, I never thought about them as virtues. It's kind of more for us. I think about it as, we have a bit of a coat of arms in our house. Like at the end of the day, like, as you know, you got these kids, you're their whole world until, I don't know, 12, maybe. I'm not there yet, but you're their whole world for a while. And then, you're basically winding them up, and then you're going to let them go. And you don't know who they're going to end up mixing with. You just don't know, right? It's chaotic. And so the coat of arms is sort of this idea of, like, the things that I want them to have gotten from having been raised in this house. So, for example, the number one thing that me and my wife probably embrace or push on them is the idea of kindness. Super important to us to be kind. I think kindness is a big definition. It's kindness means being charitable and understanding that we're all people that we're all trying to satisfy our needs, alleviate our fears. Kindness is charitably appreciating that. And, somebody can think completely different from you, but then it's always like, I don't tend to be like, oh, that's just stupid or whatever. It's very much, how did they come to those conclusions? And let's be really charitable and try to think about that. So kindness is more than just, buying coffee for the person behind you at Starbucks, which is, you should do that too sometimes. That's awesome. Like, it's really sort of like this intellectual kindness. So kindness is something that I want them to have. That's like a legacy item I want them to take away. I want them to be honest. Like, honesty is a separate variable. And that is, it's just and that was one that probably, if I think about my mother, that was like the number one thing she probably drove into my head, was just an extreme dedication to honesty. So I kind of got that from her. I believe in that. And then the other one is courage, or actually recently I've been reading a lot of VGR stuff, Venkatesh, and he has a better way of expressing it, nerve, to have nerve. And he thinks a lot of failures that we have are not failures of imagination or intelligence or anything like that, but they're just failures of nerve. And the thing about nerve is that we can all have that. Like, it's not reserved. It's not the domain of talent. It's not anything. It's kind of like the showing up, or just have the nerve to just do it. And there's nobody that can gatekeep that. So I think
Is nerve, just to make sure I understand, is that a proclivity to action? Is that, is
I
it
th-
like doing the thing, or
it's
the audacity to do the
yeah,
thing?
it's a bit of the audacity. It's the
Yeah,
courage.
got it.
It's the approaching life by realizing that actually in my mind is a playfulness about it. Actually,
Mm,
playful is like an honorable mention, coat of
mhm.
arms item, because I think that playfulness and not being being this over optimizer. I think playfulness is actually how we learn. It's how we actually learn. It's how we really learn. Like
Mm.
it, it's like when I say that, I mean, there's learning and there's like internalizing. And I think that the lessons you get from play are the lessons you internalize. So they put deeper roots into you. You've actually learned this if you've played with it. So what I want for the kids is to be playful and maintain that through their life. And that playfulness is part of the nerve. It's just realizing that, hey, you know what? The stakes are not that high for everything. We're all going to just die. So don't be afraid to try these things out. And, and this is probably the single biggest conversation I have with my kids all the time is reminding them like, hey, let's go try this. And and always reminding them, you are going to suck at this. I just want you to know you're going to suck at this. And why would it be different? Why would you be good at anything the first time you tried it? So it's really, I'm constantly trying to manage their expectations down and get them used to these like getting used to to being able to enjoy something without being good at it.
So could you explain a bit what you mean by nerve? Is it audacity or courage or bias towards action?
Yeah, it's courage mostly. I mean, you nailed it. It's courage. It's a bias towards action. It's, you know, just realizing that the stakes are just not as high as you think. So you should just try it. And you should expect to suck at everything that you start to do. When anything that you try to do, you should expect to suck. That's normal.
Mm.
And so the fact that you suck in the beginning has not violated your expectations. And if your expectations were not violated, then then you're not, there's no dissonance there. And then you have a foundation from which you can get better. So I think it's just a lot of times, if you're used to being good at stuff, you go in with too high of an expectation and we have to kind of like lower those. I think you can kind of train people to lower those stakes so that they're willing to try stuff. And you've probably seen the personality trait of like, there are kids that they don't want to try anything new because they know they're not going to be good at it. And
Mm.
it tends to be kids that are good at lots of stuff and they're used to getting lots of praise. So they've become dependent or addicted to the praise and they don't want to try anything where they wouldn't get the praise. I kind of like see that. I've seen that a lot.
Yeah.
I probably was like that a bit myself. So I tried to not to like counter that or counterbalance that. So I think that's pretty crippling mindset.
Yeah. And so it sounds like the context that you think of legacy is still contained in in the sense of like, what am I passing to my kids? Right. It
Yeah.
does. Let me throw out three variables. Let me know. Let me know if any of these three resonate. Is there any concept of a financial legacy? Is there any concept of a impact legacy? Like I will be known for having, taught, creating Khan Academy or, those kind of virtuous acts kind of at a level outside of the family unit. And then so financial impact, and then kind of just like flat out like egoic sense that there's a fucking building named after, the Kris wing of, I forgot where you went to undergrad, but like the wing of computer science or the wing of
Right.
financial services. Do any of those have resonance to you or?
I have a very simple answer. No, I literally feel nothing on those
Wow.
dimensions. Yeah, it's actually a kind of a funny thing because it's a source of tension with some people that I know that
Mm.
I don't care about those things, and I just don't have. I don't even know why. Like intellectually speaking, it's just I'm not wired that I don't know. I'm just not wired that way.
Mm.
I don't think too much about. I don't think too much about that, and it's not like I don't think about my mortality. I totally do, but it's not something that concerns me. I mean, as far as one thing that kind of comes up a lot is this. It kind of bugs me, but this like generational wealth thing that I keep hearing people go on and on about, and I've kind of I've firsthand seen people that I know. I've kind of
Wait,
seen,
can you frame when you say generational wealth, it means passing it on or
y-
not passing it on
yeah,
or passing it on? Okay.
passing it on, and a lot of people that people that will use this term are interested in. Let me just say what it conjures to me. When I hear generational wealth, I basically hear people that are focused on some kind of like financial freedom, and they themselves oftentimes probably just aspire to be this like idle absentee landlord.
Mm.
like I have this gripe with California that it's like buy the landowners for the landowners. Like it is
Mm.
the most backwards state in my mind as far as, by the way, I love California. I live here and I love it. It's a beautiful place, but it's completely economically backwards from how I would have created a place out of first principles. Because what it is, people that got here first just have like this, they own the land and they're entrenched. And what happens is we tax income at really, really high rates, and we tax property at close to zero rates if you've owned it for a long time. It's Prop
Mm.
13. So what we do is we favor this rentier income over people actually working, which seems incredibly backwards to me. And this idea of like providing infinite optionality to your kids and all that, it just strikes me as a recipe for making your kids obsessed with optionality,
Mm.
which doesn't seem like a great way to dig into life. Again, just VGR is so good, people should really read
Yeah.
him. But like, he's kind of described the fire movement as playing dead.
Mm.
And there is a but that's just it's kind of speaks to me. It's kind of how I think of it too. I think like a life without risk, without feeling risk, is not a life. It's
Mm.
not, even when I left my job, I kind of likened it to, I forget the name of the author, but there's this novelist that he said something to the extent of whenever you get writer's block, just write in somebody walks into the room with a gun. It's like write that into the story. And in a way, I kind of just like had a guy walk into my life with a gun. Let's just create some risk. So you can, I'm not advocating for that, by
Yeah.
the way, but I'm just saying that a life without risk where you have sort of infinite options just doesn't feel like it has enough constraint to it to actually squeeze a diamond out of out of the carbon. So it's that said, I would, yeah, sure. I would like to leave my kids something so that, that the left tail of their outcomes is sort of cut off.
Mm.
I do look around, I bemoan this situation where homes are largely unaffordable. I don't know how anybody that's 30 years old is ever going to form a family and buy a house. Like it's just completely, I mean, granted, I live in California, but just a totally unattainable idea. And that just seems really broken to me.
Mm.
So, so because it's kind of broken, I would like for my kids to not have to struggle so
Yeah.
hard that they're kind of like, always right above subsistence. So I want to give them something to kind of help out.
Mm.
Sure. I mean, I love them,
Yeah.
but I have no, but like this idea of like generational wealth, or you can sit back and collect a check or have infinite options and you can go explore whatever you want. Like it just seems like a recipe for actually a pretty unfulfilled life.
Yeah. Are there peers or people you talk to that make the argument for what's the argument for generational wealth as you've heard it's expressed to you directly, not like the intellectual one, but someone saying, oh, I want my kids to never have to work so that they can travel the world forever, or they can work at a nonprofit their whole life. Like, how do you, because you said you have these conversations with people. So what is
Right.
that? What is the other side? What is their
Yeah.
argument to you?
So the argument to me is that nobody actually outright says that they want that. But then when you talk about, nobody outright says that they want that, but their actions are different. Because when you look at their actions, they're obsessed with creating a corpus of wealth that is so large that what else would you do with that? It's not, they're obsessed with so much money. Like for me, you know, these are high paying jobs at a hedge fund. You grind away at one of those jobs for 40 years. Like your kids are probably, if you left it all to your kids, they'd be pretty well off.
Yeah.
So, but I would rather spend my money in the sense of not making money right now so that I can sort of impart my coat of arms very directly into them, very hands-on in this window. And by the way, that's partially for me. Like maybe it's even more for me than for them. I'm enjoying getting to be with them. It's like, I don't exactly know how much they're going to take out of this, but for me, this is great. So this is a consumption matter for me. Like I'm spending my money, enjoying my time with the kids. I would rather do that than just give them more money at the end.
Yeah.
And it's just that simple. It's not really, if they have more money at the end, like, I don't know what they're going to do with it, but at least I get to enjoy this and I get to enjoy this time with them. And I hope that at the end of my life, they're not like, damn, I sure wish she didn't do that and left us an extra $100,000 or something. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what blew my mind? So I know we've been texting about the book or the idea Die with Zero, which is a book by Bill Perkins, but it's a bit of a life philosophy, which was one of the questions for a podcast. But you basically made the argument, one of the arguments that he makes is that giving money to a 30-year-old child or a 20-year-old child is much different than giving it to a 55-year-old child, right? And you need to consider that. So let me ask you, so your youngest son is 8, right?
7. Yeah.
7. Okay. And you are 44?
Be 45 in 2 weeks.
You're 45. So let's say you live to the ripe age of 85.
Okay.
Right. So you'll be 85, and let's just assume you and Yin are, in lockstep on your mortality. So you live to be 85. That means your youngest son will be 47. So he'll be older than you are today.
Yeah.
So if you were to leave your 40, you both have hedge fund industry jobs. Let's say you leave them, like, I don't know, $2 million, $5 million, 10, whatever. He's 47. He's 12 years from his own retirement. Right. And you could take it to an extreme, right? Where let's say you had $10 million, but you're 90 and you're a widower. Like, what the fuck are you going to spend $10 million on? Like, you have no health. Most of your friends are dead. Your spouse is dead. Your kids are 60, 70, or your kids are 60. What's anyone going to do with $10 million at that point? So it's just like a fascinating way to think about it.
Yeah. I mean, maybe somebody might make the argument it's going to go to your grandkids or whatever, but like, then it's actually the same thing. Yeah. It could be the same thing. So it's almost like, oh, one of these generations is really going to screw up, and it'll one of these descendants is going to hit 50 and be on the street, and it'll matter for them or whatever. But it's just it kind of like spirals into absurdity to think that way. Like, well, you didn't want to help them when they were 20 in that case. I don't know.
I once spoke to a friend. This is a crazy story, but so I spoke to a friend. It's to this point of like, which generations do you help and which do you not help? And this friend was incredible. He had a job at Fang, and he had at Facebook or one of those companies. I think it was Netflix. And he had a side hustle that paid more than his VP job at Fang. So we basically had 2 close to 7-figure incomes in his early 30s. So he could see a path where he'd be, 80 with hundreds of millions of dollars. he also had come from a family where a lot of the men were really shitty.
Hmm.
Grandfather, uncles, maybe dad, I can't remember. And he was kind of, in his mind, or maybe the truth, the only one that had kind of broken the pattern
Yeah.
of bad men. And he felt that he had to basically almost do like a generational reparations. So he had to kind of atone for all of the mistakes of these men in previous generations
Wow.
because he had the financial capability to do so.
Mhm.
But it wasn't so easy because he had in his mind, he had a vision of what he basically wanted to give universal basic income to like multiple generations below him of his family lineage. So maybe like everyone from me downwards gets 10,000 a year for the rest of their lives, 20,000, your college gets paid for, whatever. But it's all really noble. It's a beautiful, inspiring story of redemption, of the American dream, of many things. But as he started to get into it, he was starting to create rules. Like you had to pass a drug test to get the money.
Mm.
And like, it does weed count, right? You know, yeah, he didn't smoke weed, so he thought weed should count. But what if they live in California? Weed's legal, right? And then you had to try to go to college. So it's almost like a means-based testing for welfare.
Yep.
So he wanted to create this codified system. And then you could see that it almost had, it's like everyone had become prisoner to this idea. The
Mm.
recipients were prisoner to these future constraints. He was prisoner to all of the edge cases that he couldn't imagine. By the way, his kids were like 3, so he was like picturing a scenario in 20 to 40 years
Yep.
for this, money. And it just, I don't know. I thought it was a beautiful thing that the essence of it was so beautiful and so sincere, but the implementation of it was totally fucked in my
I,
mind.
I can't agree with you more on that. Matter of fact, I've had this argument with somebody that's pretty close to me about this idea. I said, I can't imagine any way to faster steal somebody's agency than have a hand from the grave determine what you are supposed to do with your life. It's just an unbelievable. If I had to construct, like, okay, my whole thing about what education is about or what sort of the role. I mean, education has lots of different purposes and roles, right? But ultimately, for me, the primary role is to create agency within the person, the ability to, hey, you can initiate actions on the world and get outcomes. Like you can put in inputs and you can get outputs, and that you can shape things. And as you know, from like my writing and the way that I am, I really try to be very thoughtful about education and what kind of lessons we impart into people, especially when they're at formative years. And literally this policy of, if you do not follow my rules, you do not have access to the money. And one of them I remember having this discussion with somebody and they argued with me that, oh, well, they don't have to, I mean, they don't, I'm not making them do anything. Like, that's a false choice. If you're like, hey, I'm going to give you $1 million if you do this, and you won't get $1 million if you don't do this. I'm like, that's not a choice. It's like you never heard the word opportunity cost in your life to think that was a choice. That is not
Yeah.
a choice. So I completely agree with you.
What are some of the rules that it's like you have to go to
no, it's the
college,
same,
or same principle?
same kind of stuff. Oh, I've even heard ones where, you have to study STEM. I mean, it's like,
No, wow. Oh,
yeah, like just, yeah. Anyway,
oh man. And that's not
anyway,
even multiple generations. That's just like one, that's for kids or grandkids.
yeah, that was kind of
Ah,
like I think that was like more in terms of a grandkids type thing. But yeah,
yeah.
it's the same, but it's the same idea.
Yeah.
This like means tested access to the family jewels.
Yeah. So where do you think that comes from? Like, if you put yourself in the head of the person making those rules, like what do you think's happening?
I I'm not I So every time I hear something surprising about how anybody thinks, I always say this thing to myself. I say, there's 8 billion people in the world. Like I literally say those words inside my brain. I say, there's 8 billion people in the world. And I have a book. This is like, it's embarrassing to say it this way because I haven't read the book, but I have a book on my nightstand by Oliver Sacks, the late great psychologist, right? Or neuroscientist. It's called the title of the book is The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat. And it's like basically like other stories of sort of like crazy mental issues, right? And the spectrum of insanity and genius in the world is a clue that you have no clue what is going on in another person's head. There are 8 billion people in the world. And when I hear like the people that are obsessed with like hand from the grave, or honestly, anybody that has like these grand delusions of ego, and I just think to myself that these are in a prior era, this person would have been Napoleon.
Huh.
And today, this is just how they express
Wow.
that vision. And I don't have that. So I just cannot relate to it. And
Wow.
it's the same way I might look at somebody that's just would mistake their wife for a hat. It's just, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know how you came to that. There's no way I can get to that. And that's okay. I don't have to bridge every difference. I just have to, I can respect you and all that. I don't have to agree with it.
Yeah. I admire how you don't interject yourself into that conversation in your own head. Because I try not to as well. And I'm going to remind myself of the title. I think Oliver Sacks is a phenomenal writer. I've heard of that title. I see it with, the way I see that is there's an element of control, obviously. But I think, there's almost two sides of the coin of control. I think there's kind of the egoic control, which is like, I believe that a virtuous life involves STEM, and so I'm going to control you towards STEM. I think that there's another side of the control coin, which is a genuine fear of the absence of control, which is, I want nothing more than my kids to be happy. And I'm scared of the fact that I might not be able to control that outcome. Right. And so there's this like, and I see this, I have a few people who I'm very close to that are, they're very controlling of their kids, and they're not the, billionaire that wants their kids to, run the family company. Like they're very unassuming, quiet people, but it is just this like genuine fear that that the people they love won't see the life outcomes that they want for them.
That is that's a lovely take, right? It's really charitable. Like you believe they're acting out of some kind of fear in that regard. And I feel like I can see that. I guess I'm kind of reluctant to do this thing where I project on them some weakness, because that's me like projecting on them like, oh, you're scared. That's why you think that way.
Yeah.
Which is like, I could be wrong about how I'm thinking and they could be right. Like, and I think that I can't tell the difference between like, is that a well-calibrated piece of reality that you're projecting on this person, or are you, I don't think like this person, so now I'm just going to paint you with this brush of like, you're scared of something and that's why you're doing that. So I'm just really, really reluctant in general, like with lots of things, to sort of like pretend I have any idea where they came to that.
So it's an interesting way to think about this in that there is empathy versus projection, right? Because there's the empathy. So if someone is saying, I love this quote, hand from the grave, testing. I'm a hand from the grave person that wants this for my kids. There is a there's an empathy and a curiosity this is in my head, that's like, oh, I wonder why this person feels so strongly about something that either I don't care about or I didn't even consider, etc. Then there's the other way, which is the projection, which is like, what a fucking idiot. I can't believe this person thinks this way. Right. And I feel like such a razor's edge of like what side, and it's probably, you don't even, a human probably doesn't even fall on one side. It's not a binary, right? They're kind of meandering between both sides. Like, what the fuck is wrong with this person? And it's like, God, this person must really be suffering. And like, interesting, not for me, but wow, I'm trying to understand their perspective. I'm trying to understand what they may be feeling in this moment. It just, this doesn't have a conclusion per se, but I was just like, oh wow, that's what a tension as a human, right?
Yeah, I'll go. You can go a step further. What's crazy about this is, in one of these conversations I've had, one of these people is, they felt like I was doing a misjustice to my kids. They're like, how are you not trying to save more money to give to your kids? You don't love your kids. They didn't say it that way. You know, that's like, obviously wouldn't say something like that harshly, but it was like, you're going to leave your kids in the cold. Don't you see this world, what's happening? How can you do that to them? And so they thought actually, they went as far as to say, like, I'll take care of your kids.
Wow.
Because if you're there, like, not like live up to they felt so strongly about this responsibility of this. So, and it's a great question. Is like, are they acting from fear? Like, what's right?
Yeah.
Like, as far as like, is it correct that they are acting from fear? You know, in their mind, they're like, I can see the world clearly and the world is effed. And if I don't create a bunker for my kids, I'm not preparing them for the realities of this world. Like, they are operating from this place where they think they have a very calibrated sense and they think I'm a fool.
Yeah.
And obviously I don't think I'm a fool, but I'm also not 100% certain that I'm right.
And I think it gets, I mean, this is why this legacy question is so prickly, because it is the people, you know, if you circle back, we're still talking about direct family, right? We're talking about money that we leave them. We're talking about, you know, the tools that we give them or that we don't give them to show up in the world. And that's for damn sure. Not only is there no right or wrong answer, but we're going to be long gone to even know what the right answer was.
It's so merciful. It's so merciful. I'm not even going to get to find out. I love that.
I know. You mentioned, though, another pivot on this question, but I think they're related, is that there's a tension. You said something, there's a tension with people around something like not wanting to leave an quote unquote impact, right? And look, I mean, I think I would suspect that this is the case with you. I know it's the case with me. Like, if I just continue what I'm doing and I give my kids what I think, you know, is fair, or just like what I leave them enough to do the things we're talking about, there's going to be money left over. And so I always say to myself, oh, that money will go to charity, or, you know, I'll give it away to someone. I don't want my kids to have it if there's significant windfall beyond, you know, maybe a down payment for a house or something like that. But I also feel bad sometimes that, like, I don't have, like, obviously I care about the environment. I care about, you know, social and racial inequality. I care about a lot of the causes, movements that are dominant today. But I don't care enough that it's like my raison d'être. It doesn't define me. I don't spend every minute of my life thinking about it. And yeah, I'll give money to certain causes, but I probably won't give a tremendous amount of my time or my mind space. And when I heard you say the tension of impact, that's what again, it's like, what are you projecting? What are you fearing? That's what I heard in that. But if you could circle back to that question, the question that we had earlier, that moment we had earlier, what is that tension around, you know, leaving? A lot of people say, I want to leave the world better than than how I found it. That's my legacy. Leaving the world better than how I found it.
Yeah. I think that ends up being wrapped up sort of in just the way you are, right? It's like, again, like, how do you move through the world? How do people feel when they're around you? It's just to me, that just feels like a bit like again, like the funeral thing. People show up to your funeral and they're like, you know what? I'm better off for knowing this person. Then you've kind of satisfied that, if that's what you want. If people want to make larger impacts or whatever, that's great too. I mean, giving is a large part of our life. Like, there are lots of things we feel quite passionate about and that we give to on a regular basis. And that kind of gets wrapped up in that. Is any one of these things going to be something that we devote everything? No, probably not. I mean, I wouldn't preclude it. Like, you never know what's going to happen, what's going to grab your inspiration. But for the most part, I just think about it as the way you move through the world. I have a big, like, something that sounds, cliche is not the word, but maybe Pollyannish is, I kind of believe that role models are still like this good thing. Like a role model is a good thing. Like, I was telling, again, like yesterday I was talking to Sunil about this, but who are people, I think about, like, people that okay, you're yelling at your kids, say, you're just like going off on them, whatever, they did something. And you know that you don't want to do that. You know that you don't want to do that. Your emotions are getting the best of you. And sometimes I think that the best way to navigate that is, I need to fixate on somebody, that's a model for, like, you know what, when I'm in a situation like this, I want to emulate this person, because that's tangible. Like, because you can kind of embody them but you have to get them into your mind first. So having this, like, stable or cabinet of people in your mind that you've seen the way they move through the world. I like to observe teachers and coaches that have this beautiful balance of firm, but they have a light touch. They can sort of like hold space in both ways. And, like Bobby Knight was one way, but then, you might imagine, like, Steve Kerr is probably another way. And if you can channel these people, and then if you think about the different domains of your life, like, who is the person you want to be like when you are in a classroom setting, or you like teaching people? Whose touch do you want to have? And if you can channel that person, it can help you. And so sometimes I think it's useful to, as human beings, what are we best at? It's like imitating. It's like, we're come out of the box as imitators. I'm going to inherit your wants, your desires, I'm going to mimic everything you do. So in that case, let me be cognizant that my kids are watching, other people are watching. And there's a fine line there, because you don't want to, you can't live your life being a slave to what you think other people want. Like, you can't please everybody. And sometimes I'm a pleaser personality, but your pleaser personality is very obvious to me. You're a pleaser personality. I'm a pleaser personality. I have to do active things to kind of counterbalance that. Sometimes I need to summon confrontation sometimes. But for the most part, I do think of myself as, and maybe that is where my ego is, that's where it lives. It says, I have a chance to be somebody else's model for how to act in this particular way. And I am aware of that. And I pay attention to that. I am never mean on the internet. It's not because I'm so damn wholesome that I don't have mean thoughts, man. Like there are times when I just,
internet.
Yeah, there are absolutely times when I just want to say, you're effing, okay. But I don't do it because it's not charitable. I don't know what's going on in this person's head. I don't know what happened to them that morning, all of that stuff. So the way I conduct myself on the internet is very, very conscious about how I would want to see other people. And that's not to say that I don't want everybody, honestly, sometimes people that are like trolls and stuff like that, I kind of love it.
Yeah.
It's just not me.
Yep.
And it's not going to be my style, and it's not what I want. but I'm aware of my role as a 45-year-old man in society that people might be looking at me,
Yeah.
especially my kids, my nieces, my nephews, that kind of thing.
I love that. And it's beautiful in that, you know, maybe we're coming full circle here because we're kind of where we began with a question where some people may hear, and I'm one of them, that legacy needs to be heroic. Heroic in impact, heroic in relevance, heroic in financial means. And then there's another flavor of legacy or another side of the coin, however you want to put it, that is it's how you showed up,
Yeah.
right? It's what did the 5 people at your funeral say, right? Every time I saw Kris K, he was kind. Every time he did, he always made me, someone said this the other day, that this person always made me feel like that I was special, right? And just, it didn't matter if you were the CEO of BlackRock or the person cleaning the cubicles at the end of the day. This one person always made me feel special. And, maybe there's a beauty in that kind of the simplicity or the defanging of sorts. Because that, to me, legacy is a very loaded word, right? I think I hear heroic legacy where maybe that's making a mountain out of a molehill, so to speak.
Yeah, I think you said it. You said it best. I mean, legacy is just it's what you did every day. It's the sum of every little thing every day. Is that doesn't mean you're going to not screw up and all that, but it's like on average over time, this is who you are. It's honest. It's forgiving. It's self-forgiving to yourself because it's not, it doesn't depend on this one grand thing. It's just, can I live in accordance to what I think is right every day on average and, navigate compromise as well and all that stuff. And it's just little things. Yeah. I mean, maybe in my next life, I'll have a Napoleonic, like heroic desire. Like this one, it's just never struck me that way.
Yeah. Beautiful. Well, oh man, we did a full tour of the question, man. So I'm glad. I don't know what's any one thing kind of really jump out, not necessarily a conclusion, but what resonated the most from this exploration?
I just appreciated how you tried to, when you hear the different arguments, how you do try to get into their heads a little bit and try to understand what that is. I often stop short of trying to do that and just, I just accept it as like what it is. And I don't try to necessarily diagnose. And I think that if you engage people, if you think that second level deep and you engage people on it, you might get to uncover more to it. And that's why you interview people and I don't.
Yeah, not yet. Well, thank you. And again, I'm very careful. Is like, where is my projection and where is my curiosity? That's always going through my head. Am I projecting because I got my portfolio of insecurities that I like to project on others? Or am I genuinely curious from a place of love, care? And so that, that's what's going on in my head. And no means is that heroic. No means do I view it as this heroic thing. I would say that for me, I think I've been playing with this idea that, we make these things like legacy with a capital L, legacy with a lowercase l, or trauma with a capital T or trauma with a lowercase t, or love with a capital L, or, like love you might have for your spouse. Maybe that's capital L love. And then the love that you might have for your neighbor, right? That's a lowercase. Or, some might argue that they don't need to be distinguished. But I know that for me, when these big loaded words, happiness, impact, legacy, fulfillment, when I hear them, I always hear the capital L, legacy, which is, Steven Schwartzman has, named, he bought the dining hall at Yale for $1 billion donation, right? I hear capital L when really my heart and my actions compel me to the lowercase l, which is kind of that showing up every day. It's mundane. It's beautiful in its mundaneness, so to speak. And that's kind of that's the takeaway that I took is to not always go to the capital letter.
Dennis Leary says like, happiness is a chocolate chip cookie, man. It's not the capital H big thing that you constantly are sitting inside all the time. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a wave.
God, I haven't heard Dennis Leary's name in a. You made me think of the cassette. Remember that song? I'm an S, so he's an S.
Yeah. Oh,
I had
amazing.
the cassette of that.
Yeah.
That?
Oh yeah. Same. It was, I think it was, well, the stand-up was No Cure for Cancer, if I remember correctly. It's one of the all-time greats.
Wow. God.
Yeah.
Is he still alive? Yeah, he must
He
be.
is still alive. And you know what? I don't even know any of his other stand-up.
Yeah.
It was that one stand-up from the 80s that was just amazing.
Wow.
So
Amazing. Well, we always wrap with a creator, a thinker, an artist, a writer that you want to shout out. We could put on our small platform.
yeah, totally. Yeah, I have one that I'm stoked about. It's somebody that I met through my wife. She was on my wife's podcast. Her name is Allison Bishop. And Allison, her story is awesome, but she is a PhD computer scientist who she kind of has a crazy story coming up, but like she's a computer scientist, she's a writer, she's a comedian. She's written a children's book where she's created characters to help teach kids math. She basically got the equivalent of a PhD in math as well, but she transferred sort of at the end. She's wicked, like, super, super smart woman. But she's super awesome. But one of the things that I think is so neat about her is how she is the embodiment of something that I think that we all should remember is that we're multitudes, right? So we're not like she runs a trading brokerage firm that develops like super sophisticated algos, and she does it in a way, she markets it in a way. I mean, it is like unlike what I've seen from a lot of the business. She is very transparent, insanely transparent in what she does. She's very contrary to the way the zero sumness of our business looks like. However, she does all of that so she's in this knife fight, the zero sum knife fight, but she's able to bring herself to it and humanize the whole thing in a way that I think is just reminds you that you don't not need to compartmentalize everything. Yeah. And you can bring your holistic self to everything. And like I said, she's also a comedian. She has a really, really funny bit on YouTube, by the way, of basically men who give themselves award for supporting, like it's an award for men who support women in finance. Men for men who support women in finance. It's absolutely hilarious. I'll send you the link so you can put it in there. But yeah, Allison Bishop, and her website is thecomputersciencecomedian.com.
Oh, amazing. I remember seeing you share that. So I'm going to go check out the episode as well.
Cool.
Kris, always a pleasure. Can't wait to do this again. I appreciate you, man. This is awesome.
This is awesome. I'll see you in a couple of weeks.
All right. See you, brother.
Later.